It is a tremendous pleasure to welcome Anna Ludlow to this podcast. She is a wonderful fiddler, currently based in Ottawa, Canada. How are you today, Anna? Thank you for joining us.
I'm very good. Thank you so much for having me.
So before we begin, tell us about your summer.
Oh, the summer's been really busy. I started off with an East Coast tour in July, and I went to Rollo Bay Fiddle Festival, which is an incredible festival in Surrey, PEI, run by some of the folks from the East Pointers. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're fantastic. And then I was did a few shows. I'm like drawing a blank. I'm trying to remember. My summer was so busy. In Antigonish, Nova Scotia, and I did Levy on the Lake in New Brunswick, Summerfest in Antigonish, Nova Scotia at the end of August. And then there was a really cool festival here in Ottawa called Chamber Fest, and that was really fun. We did a couple children's shows and some other ones, and then I was in Newfoundland with the Ennis sisters, who are an incredible sister vocal group, and we toured a little bit around Newfoundland, I guess, mid-July. So that was sort of the gist of my summer, but all of it mixed in pretty much took up the whole thing. And now I'm getting ready for fall and Christmas shows.
Awesome. Yeah. Actually had Tim Jason of the East Pointers on the show once.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
He's such a wonderful person, and he is doing a lot for the music community. He runs 2 festivals now and promotes in the tune room a lot of really cool traditional tunes. And you can follow him. He's just a great resource in the Celtic community. I loved him.
Yeah. Tell me about the Rollo Bay Fest.
Roller Bay for me, I've always wanted to play at it. I know it's been going on for many years. The Chason family has been putting it on. Kevin Chason is the dad of the big group, sort of Tim's dad and whatnot. So he's an incredible tune writer and musician, and they sort of trying to keep the tradition alive. It's sort of, I think, developed sort of as a family fun sort of event. And as years went on, they're getting bigger and bigger acts and bringing in lots of people from all over Canada. And it's a 3-day festival. This year was they had Rum Rag, they had some of the Vishtan folks, of course. Vishtan, the East Pointers lost somebody, and the Vishtan lost one of their members, so it's been very sad. But they sort of joined together, called Six Hearts, which is representing 2 of the members that passed away. So 4 of them, plus they're putting together an amazing band. It's actually quite incredible. If you haven't listened to Six Hearts, you really should. So they were sort of the big moment at the festival, because it was obviously bittersweet, coming together, showing love through music, but also missing those people. But the influence of the 2 people that passed away, Cody Chason, I don't know if you know about Cody, and Emmanuel's sister, they really were incredible, and it was really lovely to be a part of that situation. And then I played in the middle of the weekend and participated in the awesome square dances in the evening. And my daughter Eva is 7 turning 8, and she did also really enjoy the music. So I'm taking my children to these events, which I think is also really important, to bring the kids out, whether you play music or not, to keep all of these awesome traditions alive, because really folk and Celtic, it does have a lot of popularity in certain parts of the world. It's still quite unknown to many people, and people just think it's like you're sitting around playing your fiddle, but really you're entertaining people. It all goes with the history, Gaelic speaking history and bagpiping and everything, and it all comes together. So the kids really get a lot out of it, because it's just an awesome thing to instill inside of them. So I was really happy to bring my children to that.
Yeah, and it's more than just the music, isn't it?
Oh my God, it's a community of love and toe tapping entertainment of history, and the tunes are all passed on. Lots of new tunes are written. I write myself, but a lot of the old really cool tunes, like everybody plays them, and who wrote them. And I'm not like that Cape Breton fiddle player per se, where I'm really focused on tradition, which is where people are like only play at a certain speed because they have to accommodate the dancing. So the dancing is the reason why the fiddler is playing. That is something that I really respect. But I'm from Antigonish, and I have a lot of different influences. So it's actually 40 minutes from Cape Breton.
Mhm.
But I love introducing people to the fiddle itself and the music, whether it be Cape Breton tunes, Irish tunes, or something from Scotland, or something from Germany, or something francophone, French influence. So I think that what I do for myself is I bring that as a musician to other people. So more broad spectrum of the fiddle tunes, I guess, is how I would describe what I do.
Mhm.
So yeah, and you had asked, it's not about the music totally, but it is about, it does bring people together, lots of talking and history, and you can really feel the vibe.
Mhm. Yes. So in reference to the title of the show, permit me to do some philosophizing. I realize that there is a very strong connection between tradition and community. And if you do something repeatedly as an individual, you call it, well, a habit. But if you do something repeatedly as a community, then that is called tradition. And um, I think tradition is the glue that brings a community together, and the
Yeah.
Cape Breton fiddle tradition is no exception of that.
Mm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they are extremely focused on changing the language in Cape Breton. There's a lot more Gaelic speaking people. There's a lot more opportunity to learn Gaelic. It's like the Indigenous people here in Canada. We're really recognizing the history of the Indigenous people, which I think is so important. Recognizing that we're on their land and that we're respecting their land and their tradition. And I think it's the same with the culture in Cape Breton as well. Trying to really, um, you know, uh, make sure that we're not letting go of the idea of where it all came from, why we respect the music, why we respect the language, the way of life. I think that the world can go in many different directions. We can decide to play video games all day and do nothing, and not read a book or not like look into things and live that kind of life, or we can really embrace the past in such a good way, take the good things from it and the bad, and really learn from it. But there is no exception with the way, tradition, community. You'll see a lot of really wonderful hosts and hostess in Nova Scotia in particular, very open to strangers. Newfoundland, PEI, New Brunswick, I would kind of put them all in the same. Not that anybody else in Canada wouldn't do it, but it is a smaller population over in the East Coast. So I think people get upset if you're from Ontario. Of course, you're going to be hospitable, but because it's such a small community, everybody knows everybody there for the most part. Except for the big urban centers like Halifax or St. John's, Newfoundland, or something. But if you're going into pocket communities, which I just did on tour,
Mhm.
anybody would take you into their house. Anybody would offer you a drive. It wouldn't be weird to pull over and say, "Hey, can I help you with something?" And where in a city, you might be a little more nervous to do that. So I think the tradition of community and music is about hospitality. It's about the warmth, the history. Come on in for a cup of tea, and maybe my sister or my grandmother or my daughter or my son is going to play you a tune as well. And where did that tune come from? Well, this was written in 1867. It's just very, very interesting, and it's. I feel like there's a lot of history in Nova Scotia and the Maritimes, and a lot of people really embrace it,
Mhm.
especially the youth. They're coming up to embrace it more. But there's so many people playing a part in that. And one of the places in Cape Breton in particular is called the Gaelic College, and Kenneth McKenzie, Rodney McDonald. We have Don and Margie Beaton as well, who run Celtic Colors. They are bringing in people constantly, and they're preserving the way of life. So once somebody stops preserving something, then it's going to be gone. It's like extinction of animals. So we have to kind of think of it like that. And that when, if I'm kind of straying a little bit from your question, but just the tradition and the music and the hospitality, to me, that's all one big part of that culture. Because what does music do? It brings people together. If you heard somebody playing a bagpipe next door to you, or you were walking by somebody on the street, you're going to listen, and you'll often see a little crowd gathering. It gathers, it brings people together. So I think that's one of the reasons why I think music is the most important thing, and one of the most important things to introduce your children to. If anybody out there with children is hesitant, it's worth every cent to put your child in an instrument, whether it be piano, electric guitar, whatever, because music is something that takes stress away, and it really does bring people together. It's a community within itself, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yes. So I'm a member of the Catholic Church, and so I attend Mass every Sunday, or at least I try to. So when you go to a Catholic Mass, you follow a pretty predictable series of, I guess, mini events, or what you call liturgies. And I think the tradition, especially in my case, is significant because well, there was a time when every church in the Catholic framework, they speak the same language, which is Latin. But
Mhm.
nowadays, everyone speaks different languages according to their regional area. But the the liturgy is the same, or at least similar enough everywhere. So in some ways, if you enter a Catholic church, wherever you are, you always feel welcome. Like you feel like you're part of this like
Yeah.
larger larger world community.
Exactly. I'm also Catholic and I've grown up going to church my whole life. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And I actually went to New York City last year with my husband, and there was a mass going on in, I believe it was It was in a different language. I can't remember if it was Spanish or if it was in Latin. And we walked in and we just went in like just before communion kind of thing. But just because I just went in, I felt very welcome. I knew exactly what to expect. I knew when to sit, I knew when to stand. And it's very interesting. My husband's not Catholic, which is, he doesn't understand the up and down and the tradition, and often says, this is kind of crazy that you guys do this. Like, and I'm like, oh no, if you grow up with it, it's so settling. You know exactly the feeling in your heart that you get as a Catholic. It's a very interesting parallel to music, because with the music, with traditional dancing, with traditional square sets, with concerts, you do know what to expect. And if you're the type of person that really enjoys, you know, going to something like that, knowing that you're welcome, knowing that there's no anxiety involved because you know what's going to happen. It really is a nice parallel, because, you know, yeah, for sure. Like everything you said it's so true and so funny to me, because I feel the exact same way. But the language has changed from Latin, I guess, but we're still doing all of the same thing. So I think that's a good segue for me to say, like, even for me, I don't play massive trad Cape Breton anymore. I do play the tunes, but when I go play a concert in Ontario, I'm not sitting on a chair. I'm not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm not doing it like at the tempo it should be at. I often play way faster because I am entertaining with a big band. I'm standing up, I'm choosing tunes that are really high energy. And whereas if you were to talk to a traditional Cape Breton player, they would talk about the keeping the tempo is very important, because that was the way it was for years, hundreds of years, for the dancers. So there's nothing wrong with either one, but I think both things are still bringing and pushing it out to the community of the world, the Celtic, the Celtic music, which is really what it is. It's from the ancestors of the you know Ireland and Scotland. And so even if it's different, it's still the same, like going to church. Even if you're going to an English mass, Spanish mass, or Latin mass, you're going to know this is a jig and a reel. This is where I get up for communion. It's the same type of thing.
Mhm. Yeah. And of course, music plays a lot in Christianity too. It plays a big role in it. And not to invoke any sort of sectarian divide here, but I've attended Protestant churches before, and the music is that not that heartfelt. It's not that heartwarming because you have a band that's performed on stage, and you feel like you're in an audience to a concert. Like, for example, something like Taylor Swift, who apparently is coming to Ontario. But
Uh-huh.
when you listen to music in, say, a Catholic mass, and recently, as I've recently experienced an Orthodox service, you feel like you're actually participating in it. Like you're
For
not
sure.
passively taking in the music.
Yeah, I haven't really. Yeah, and I mean, in your scenario, you have the Protestant thing. I'm not sure. They're very similar masses, but I have been to lots of Christian churches as well, but I actually felt like I could sing along in all of the places I've been. But and Taylor Swift is coming to Ontario, so if you have access to tickets, you let me know. Very hard to get tickets. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's interesting, definitely, when you bring up the Christian thing.
So I'm curious as to how you introduce your children into music in general, in particular your brand of music.
Right. Well, I'm from Antigonish, where my parents are very active in the community. When I grew up, it was the radio was playing all the time with Celtic music. Mom and dad sang in church. Mom and dad sang in community events. Always had people over, guitars, fiddles, the whole nine yards. I wanted to have the same thing for my kids. I have two stepsons actually that don't have a mother who was involved in the music scene, and my husband is not a musician. So I try to like get all of my four kids, two stepsons and my two biological children, to really enjoy music. One way to do that as a parent is to always play music, but not just the same, not pop, not Bruce Springsteen, even though they're all awesome. Try to put on like the Irish Descendants, try to put on like Natalie McMaster, put on something that they're not familiar with that get a little keen and go, that's really cool. Jazz, folk, all of these things, there's nothing wrong with any of them. And with me, because I'm a full-time musician that actually gets paid to play, my kids are just involved because I'm going to a gig next week and it's a festival and the kids came. Now, my daughter in particular, because she's my firstborn daughter, I put her in piano and fiddle. But before that, I did a lot of kids' music groups and I actually taught at one of them. So that really made a big difference being there. I had to go every week. She was there and she was really young. Then I got into Come From Away, which is a play, and we can talk about that later, but she ended up traveling with me and she was constantly with me. So when mom does a gig, she's there. And now she's a Highland dancer, an excellent champion Highland dancer. Actually, she's 7 years old, going on 8. And she now dances in my show. And now she can chord the piano to the fiddle, which she's going to incorporate in some of my Christmas shows this year. But the love of it comes from me loving it and taking her to things. And then she sees other kids like Natalie McMaster's kids, who she loves. And I love her, Natalie and her kids. They're an excellent, wonderful group that are just touring. Like they're incredible. If you don't know have you seen them at all on like YouTube or anything? Natalie McMaster and Danelle Leahy. They're
I've
incredible.
interviewed Natalie on the show.
Oh, okay. So she's amazing. She's such a
Yes,
cool person and so down to earth. She is, I just can't say enough good things about her and her kids. Like they're literally like their own like enterprise. That's what I call it. Like they could own the world. And Eva looks at their YouTube videos every day and she goes, I want to play the fiddle like that. And I want to go on stage like that. Even though I don't live in Cape Breton, even though she's not going to square dances every week like some kids, I believe that I'm giving her tons and tons of history of the Celtic stuff. And we don't just play the fiddle here, we do dancing and we listen to Ottawa Valley music, which is awesome fiddling, which is a different style of fiddling. But see, I was also involved in the fiddles on the Rideau. I was on the board of directors where we were focusing on Canadian fiddling as a whole. And because there's National Fiddling Day in Ottawa, the bill was passed quite a few years ago. Once a year, we were going out on the Rideau River promoting the fiddles on the Rideau. Currently, I'm not on the board of directors anymore, but I'm still a very big fan of what they're doing. They just did a festival this year. But my daughter was involved in that. She'd come to the event. We're promoting Canadian fiddle music, and that's where I really feel it's important as a mother and as a teacher in the community. I think it's important to talk about all fiddling. So when I teach fiddle to children, I don't just teach Cape Breton tune. I might pick a tune that's very obscure or something from somewhere else. That's why even in the Ottawa Valley, there's a little bit more of a classical technique, more of a, if you listen to the different playing. And I think there's something really neat about exploring all of it. So I take my daughter to everything, and that's why she loves it. So now she wants to do XYZ. She's playing the fiddle. She's playing, but I mean, lots of people who don't know about fiddle. Sometimes I have mothers who I teach their kids and they've never even heard a fiddle tune. I say, well, you gotta put the fiddle music on for the kid. The kid comes to my house, learns a fiddle tune and doesn't want to practice because the mom's listening to rock and roll. You have to expose the kid to the tune, to the music. You can't just expect somebody to play in a rock band and you're only playing, whatever, something like a francophone channel all the time. Or I'm trying, you know what I'm trying to say. I'm not quite making the proper example, but it's really important to listen to the music, period, whether it's on the radio, whether you go to a live event.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm doing for my kids. My son is 3 and I have a fiddle for him and he just goes around scratching on it and he dances. He thinks he's doing great. And I just let him walk around the house. And if he drops the fiddle, I don't care. If he breaks it, I don't care. What, they're worth $200 or something. I always had a piano in my house when I was growing up. And I made sure that I had a piano in my house, like a real piano upright for my children. And guess what? Banging around on the piano all the time. And now my daughter can play really well. I mean, she's taking lessons, but having the opportunity for the child to see an instrument is my number one thing I would tell any parent. Throw a guitar on the floor that's cheap, throw a piano there, put a little drum set in your house because it's very expressive for a child.
Mhm. Yeah. Just as a side, so when is National Fiddle Day?
So it's in July, I think. I can't remember if the end of June or maybe it's in May. Oh my gosh, I'll have to look it up on my phone while we're here. But we did I've been doing it on Parliament Hill
Oh wow.
in Ottawa almost every year. Like we go play for the Senates and whoever else was there. And then when we started Fiddles on the Rideau, it was from the concept of preserving Canadian fiddling, which is very, very important. And then it turned into a festival where there's workshops. And they did want to do a flotilla on the Rideau River. It came from Fiddles on the Tobic in New Brunswick. They used to go down the river there and they'd have hundreds of people in canoes with fiddles. So this is the woman that came up with the idea. Cheryl Fitzpatrick wanted to do the similar thing here in Ottawa. So she just did her first festival this past summer. Yeah, so National Fiddling Day, National Fiddle, let me see. National Fiddle Day is May 18th. World Fiddle Day, celebrating every third Saturday in May, is an annual celebration of fiddle music. This year it falls on May 18th.
Mhm.
So it's National Fiddling Day, yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been to Ottawa at least twice. I lived for 4 years while studying my undergraduate, actually in Peterborough.
Nice. Where do you live now?
Currently Budapest, Hungary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were that far away. So what time is it there?
6 p.m.
Okay, not too bad then.
Mhm. So I'm afraid I cannot score Taylor Swift tickets for you.
Oh man. All right.
Yeah, I've enjoyed myself every time I went to Ottawa. First it
That's
was
good.
in the winter, and second it was either I think in the summer or in the fall.
Yeah.
Um, and the Rideau Canal is particularly amazing.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It really is.
Mhm. So I'd like to ask you this question as a parent, because I think it is now well known that having a stable and of course loving home life is it's a conduit to stable development for children, right? And I think the the common mistake that parents make is either to be way too involved in their children's lives, and you have a term for it, right? Helicopter parent. And
Mm.
you or you uh in or you have as little involvement in your children's lives as possible. And in this case, there's this term for it in the 80s. It's called latchkey kids. And
Okay.
I wonder, as a mom, what degree of how do you balance this between these two, like
Yeah.
degrees of involvement?
Well, I have an amazing husband who also, obviously was married before I married him and he had two kids. So he had a little more experience parenting than I did when we met. And then I met him, we got married very quickly and I was stepmother before I was mother. But so I think between the two of us, we work really hard that the kids feel loved. That's our number one thing. So I don't care if my kid is great at hockey or great at the piano or yeah, of course I want them to do well. Do I want them to do well in school? Yes. If my kid is failing school, do I get a tutor? Yes, because I care about my child's development. But I think what we do first is number one is the heart. How is the heart? That's how I parent my kids. I always want to make sure they feel loved. Everything else to me is secondary. So even if you're in a home where there's some fighting with a parent or everybody's going to have conflict, nobody's perfect. But what the child needs to see is reconciliation. And that's what also we need to see in our world, right? Reconciliation is the key to success for everybody. Forgiveness is amazing. So as a parent, you forgive yourself, you forgive your child, vice versa. And you have that sort of open relationship, even with a 3-year-old. I'm not perfect. I might say, hey, stop, or raise my voice or whatever. And then I can go right 5 minutes later, give a hug and say, I'm really sorry. And the other thing I've learned about my 3-year-old, who is a very busy boy, I often just hug him. I read a great article, hugging your child and not letting go first is the most important thing for regulation for a child. So he's having a hard day. Instead of going, hey, 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 say, come and give me a big hug. And maybe that 4 minute, 3 minute, 2 minute, 1 minute hug can change his whole course of the day. And I've been trying it and it's been working. So I don't helicopter necessarily where I'm on everybody, but I'm very focused on making sure my kids are well loved, cared for. Are you guys okay? Are you bathing them? I look at their physical stuff, I look at their emotional stuff, and then everything else is secondary. So when it comes to activities, yes, I want them to do well in things, but at the minute they say they're not happy with it, I don't force it. And I think I'm an 80s child. Luckily, my parents were very involved in my life in terms of care, and we had a really loving home. So I didn't grow up in a way where I would know any different than being like a great loving mother. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I still, we sit around the table to have our dinners, and Christmas morning is exciting, and we talk about holidays, and we have people over. I'm always hosting, opening my door to any stranger. And just recently I had 2 tickets to an event that I was a bracelet. It was an event here in Ottawa that I paid $40 for, but I didn't end up putting the bracelets on. I just went in with my kid and did what I had to do when I was leaving. Realized I didn't use the bracelets, and I pulled over on the road, and this older couple was walking to the event, and I said, "Have you bought your tickets?" And they said, "No." I said, "Do you want my bracelets?" And they were like, "Oh," they were kind of freaked out that I offered. And I said, "Well, I paid for them and I didn't put them on, so it's up to you. Save yourself $40." So they took them, and my daughter said, "Mom, that was cool." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "What am I going to do with them? Why not help somebody? Why not give something to somebody?" So those are the small things that I try to do with my kid. Instead of giving them so much advice, I think doing actions speaks so much louder than this pointing. I don't know if this is a video recording or me talking recording, but I'm saying do what you would do for yourself for your kids. So actions speak louder than words. And I think that's a balance between the helicopter parent and the non-existent parent. Now, I am a very much involved parent. I don't even really know much about that 80s term, but will I let my kid go outside without me? Yes. Do I worry that a car is going to hit my kid on a busy street? Yes. So there's a fine balance. I'm not screaming at my kids like, watch the cars, watch the cars, watch the cars. You have to learn how to trust each other and try to let the kid also make mistakes. So I sit in a very big world of a lot of fun and a lot of love. And I'm very goofy with my kids. I think humor is really important when you have kids. If you can't laugh at somebody pooping on the floor or spilling a Dairy Queen Blizzard on your shirt or something, then you really need to lighten up. That's how I look at things. Or buy yourself a bottle of wine for the end of the day.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, so just to put a little asterisk on it, a latchkey kid referred to a kid who, because they always return to an empty home each evening after school, they're given a set of keys that they can let themselves in and out whenever they please. So that's where the term comes from. And also the conversation is recorded via both audio and video. So
okay. There you go. So I can point.
um so to follow up on that, you have a different challenge to bridge through as a stepmom. I grew up in Vietnam, specifically Hanoi, and I don't know too many parents with kids who are divorced. Maybe it's not that it's not that encouraged in our culture, I suppose. But
Yep.
I know that in Western society, it's unfortunately much more common. And I suppose, uh, I suppose as a stepmother, you always have to overcome the hurdle of the kids seeing you as the character from Cinderella. So I suppose, how do you manage to go through that?
It's funny you said that, and maybe we could have 5 podcasts together. I could do stepmother one, mother one, music one. So I am lucky because my husband's ex-wife and I and him work together as a team. So we have been together from the beginning through much work. It was not perfect, but the 3 of us have constantly worked together for the better of the 2 boys. So they're 2 boys. And I have always maintained that I am Anna to the boys. I am a loving person in their life, a friend, a mentor. I am not their mother. So that was always the way it was from the beginning. They have a wonderful mother. we have 50-50 custody. So I am with them 50% of the year.
Mhm.
I treat them like I treat my children. My husband is an incredible father. I think it would be really tough if my husband was a terrible dad, you know, or non-existent dad or worked too much. My husband puts the kids first. Like he's incredible. All four of the kids are his. He like is awesome, and the kids are really well-rounded because of the relationship. And my two kids have a relationship with my husband's ex-wife, and one of my kids is actually going with her out on an outing in the coming week, and they do stuff together. So we've created this family dynamic. We could do the 80s, 90s old school, don't talk to you, I hate the ex-wife thing, but what does that do for anybody? And it comes back to the music again. Sharing and caring and community, holding on to anger is not the way to live your life. Music does bring love to people. That's what I do for a living. And I can't be pretend to do that on stage and then not do it in my personal life. So I don't believe I'm the Cinderella stepmother person for my two stepsons. I've been with them both for 10 years. Do they find me annoying when I say, please put your clothes in the clothes basket? I'm sure they do, but they're teenagers. But no, I'm very loving and caring, and I do my best to have the best relationship as I can. But I know my boundaries, and I think that's the most important thing as a stepmother. Don't force yourself on somebody or make them call you mom. You're not the mother unless there's no mother or an abusive mother and a non-existent mother, and you do take that on or you're adopting the child. But if you have a good mother in the background, you don't need to be the mother. You just have to be you and be supportive and loving to those kids. And I think that will completely take away the evil stepmother scenario. Now, if they were here in the interview, I'm sure they'd agree. But we have a really fun, not with the evil stepmother part, but we have a really fun dynamic. And also, I have two children that are their siblings, half siblings. So they love the siblings. They love me. I'm the mother of their siblings. So it's a different dynamic than I think some people come together with two families, two sets of siblings that aren't related is very difficult. But in my situation, I try to just be really loving to people. I can't be mean. Like I can't do it. So that's just who I am. I want kids to feel happy. And one thing I'll leave it at this. You're only a kid for a small part of your life. The smallest part of your life, you're a child. The rest of your life, if you're lucky enough to live, is an adult. So if you're mean to a child or you're rude to a child, they're going to remember that. And when they're an adult, because it's happened to me and it probably happened to you, what adults were really nice to you and who wasn't. Do you respect that adult now that you're an adult? Probably not. Could be an uncle, could be somebody else. So I always said, as long as I am a nice adult to these children, someday my stepsons are going to be 30, someday they're going to be 40. They're going to have a wife and a kid, and they're going to come to my supper table. And I want them to say, oh, Anna was so nice to us and funny and loving. And because what's the point of being nasty to somebody? It just comes back to bite you. So if you have good relationships with kids, you're going to have a great relationship with them as an adult. So that's how I go about it.
Yeah, I think it's quite apparent that people as adults, they bring on their traumatic childhood experiences with them, like whether it's like slight or massive. And in some ways, you can explain certain behaviors that adults do that are either nice or not nice by surveying their childhood experiences. Do you find
Yes.
that to be the case?
Oh, I do. And it's so sad. I'm not a professional by any means. I do have my psychology degree and I do work in the school board with children with disabilities. I see a lot of abuse and I see a lot of kids who are very, you know, held back in their personalities, have a hard time expressing themselves, a lot of anxiety. It can come from a lot of things. There is a genetic component that we have to remember, but I do think that people's childhoods play a big part in their, I mean, of course it does. I mean, people can't let go of things. They're in their 50s and they're still blaming their mother for something that happened when they were 12. I have a really hard time with that. Comes back to my point about reconciliation. You have to forgive yourself and you have to forgive somebody else in order to move on with your life. So nobody's perfect. But if you can come up with some, and it comes back to the Catholic Church too, I'm sure you would agree. Forgiveness is the only real way to live a wonderful life. So you can have a messed up childhood, but you can also let it go when you're an adult if you can come to the conclusion or get some professional help. But forgive yourself and forgive the person because it's in the past.
I see. Well, So closing the dialogue on being a mom. So, well, what is the difference between connecting with your daughters and connecting with your sons?
I don't really feel like there's a difference in the way I treat anybody, but it is nice to have a daughter. We do our hair together, we get our nails done together. We like to shop. We we enjoy that. I'm really happy I have a daughter. I have three sons. My son and I are really close. My little boy, we lots of cuddles, but he loves his dad and he loves trucks and he loves playing with my husband. He always wants my husband. And I think that's really cool and great. I think I'm lucky to have both genders in my house. But I don't really find there's a difference in any way that I feel about anybody. I still am the exact same way to all of the kids combined. And I just want the best for all of my kids. And I really am excited for the day that they bring their partners to my supper table because I want all of them to be the same, invite people into their homes. And I'm instilling social stuff. So a lot of people are very closed off. They don't want to have people over. They don't cook dinners for people. But I want my kids to see that. That's what we do. That's what you should do. Bring people together because people are awesome. It's community is the best thing you can have in your life. If don't have community, then you don't have anything.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that goes back to the earlier part of our discussion. The great, I think it's Irish British philosopher and statesman Edmund Burke. He really emphasized what he calls the little platoons of society, and by that he refers to you know pockets of population that consists of more than one person. So the family, the community, and certain associations relating to either trade or hobby and etc. And he believes that this is the perfect middle ground between the alienated individual and the tribalistic mass, so to speak. And between the individual and the mass, there's community, and this creates a kind of stability within society and meaning in each individual's lives. So I guess in your experience, how have the little platoons of society affect you?
You know, I came from a very rural community growing up where you could go to the neighbor for a cup of sugar, and that's not a cliche.
Wow.
I am now in Ontario, in Ottawa, and I wouldn't probably go to all the neighbors to knock on the door, but I've made a massive effort to go to know my neighbors, my direct, neighbors. I'm obviously in a suburb, you're not going to know everybody, but I do know a good majority of them, and I think that makes a huge difference. People start to look out for your child. People start to look around and make sure that you didn't leave your car lights on at night, and it's when you make an effort in the community, it will really come back. Okay, so for the person that can't do that, maybe try to make an effort to just meet one neighbor, so that you have somebody you can chat with or that somebody you can rely on. And for me, I'm just very social. So I go out and I'm not afraid to talk to anybody. So that's fine. But I know there's some people who are more reserved. I think community is the best thing you can ever have. And I think it's available everywhere you live in the whole world. You just have to look for it.
Mhm. Yes. So with that said, tell me about your own upbringing.
Oh, I was so lucky. I am the youngest of four kids. I have an older sister, an older brother, and another older sister. I had many people live with us. We had a lot of exchange students come from China that live with us, and we had my mom and dad fostered kids a lot. One particular girl ended up like living with us for 7 years. So my house was always open to people. And when we had the exchange students, they would often bring different culture, food wise. So we'd have an exposure to some of this stuff that you would never have in rural Nova Scotia. Um, Mom and dad were like, my mom was home all the time, and she actually homeschooled me for 3 years. My mom was an incredible cook, a baker. My father was a school teacher, and he was an incredible person, kindest man I think I've ever met. And he still is. They're both still alive and well. And they totally immersed themselves in the community. They ran the music ministry in the church for 17 years. They sang every week. They were Eucharist, all the stuff in the Catholic Church they did. My dad's and I did Columbus. My mom and dad volunteered for almost every wedding and funeral that ever existed for free. They would play. They would do tons of volunteer work with sports, with anything. And so I grew up in a very busy go to the community. So I was just totally ready to take on being a professional musician, because by the time I was 9, I was playing fiddle. My parents would be singing in church, actually, and I would play the fiddle in church with them. And even though you think, okay, what are we doing? But that in itself is practice to perform, right? You're performing in front of the congregation. As a child, you don't really think of it like that. You're just kind of playing backup squeaky violin. But because of my parents, I was able to get out in public constantly playing my fiddle, and community events at like say the community hall. They say there was a fundraiser. My mom and dad sang traditional Irish and Scottish music. My dad played guitar, my mom sang. So they were always singing at all these events. Eventually I started joining them, and now my mom always jokes, she now joins me when I have a show. So because of them, I truly believe I am who I am in terms of who I am, obviously, but as a musician, because I didn't grow up in Cape Breton where like a Natalie would tell you, oh, my uncle Buddy McMaster played, and my uncle this, my cousin, and my aunt, and it goes on, 35 people. I have not one fiddle player in my family. I'm the only one. I believe there was one other person, maybe a cousin, and somebody on my dad's side, because my dad's from Cape Breton. But I am not coming from a long lineage of big, beautiful musicians. I'm Anna Ludlow. I play the fiddle. I love singing. But my parents, my mom's side is Scottish. My dad's side is English and Newfoundland, which is Irish. And there's a lot of music that comes from there. So I am an anomaly in a way where I don't have that steep tradition. But I always tell people I love Celtic music. Anybody can do it. You don't have to be from a certain pocket of the world to play the fiddle, to play music. But back to your question, how was my childhood? It was extremely amazing. And I always said, if I had to pick a place to go back to, I'd go back there. I'm lucky. I know people aren't always as lucky, but I had a beautiful property. We had like fields and rivers, and I mean, I lived outside. There was always a home cooked meal. My parents never fought. They didn't drink alcohol. So I was extremely lucky, and they're still together. They never divorced. So I'm very blessed. And I want that for my kids too. And like you said, your culture frowns upon divorce. The Western culture, just everybody gets divorced. And even if I was unhappy, half the time I say to my husband, we would have to work on it so hard, because the kids are number one, and I want them to have a good upbringing. Obviously, people break up for other reasons that are very bad, and we don't judge that if there's abuse or anything like that. But I'm just saying, in general, people give up on people very quickly. It's just so easy to go online and meet somebody. It's so easy to say, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to go to the bar and do that. But you don't have to live your life like that. You can live your life in a commitment, which goes back to music. You have to commit to it. You have to practice. Well, marriage is a practice. Raising children is a practice. Nobody's good at it. You have to work at it. So I'm very passionate about keeping people together, keeping communities together. And back to reconciliation, forgiving yourself and forgiving others in order to have a healthy relationship, whether it's a child, whether it's a business, whether it's a music relationship. Always trying to put your best foot forward, because we all make mistakes, and we all do things 10 years ago that we'd never do today. So my childhood made me who I am today. And my parents were very, very Catholic. So a lot of talk about forgiveness in my house.
Mhm. Yeah. So I was thinking about this wonderful book by Robert Putnam, who's a Harvard political scientist. It's called Our Kids, and I think if you're a big reader, you really should. I guess I'm way too big of a reader, so I always have like book titles lying in my head here and there. So in that book, he was contemplating how the phrase "our kids" changed when he was growing up to when he was writing the book, which is from the 1950s to the later part of the 2010s. So when he was growing up, our kids means the kids that were not just in the family, but in the community as well.
Yeah.
So it includes your own kids and also the kids that are around the neighborhood. But because of the process of social atomization. Our kids now refers to, well, the children that you gave birth to and raised, and that creates a crisis in community cohesion. So I guess
Right.
with that established, how how have you of course we've alluded to this before, but how have you I guess tried to manifest this older definition of our kids? How have you uh,
Well, it's sad. I don't want to talk about politics, but look at the way Canada is going right now. Look what happened during the pandemic. Everybody alienated themselves from everybody else. And you're bad because you had an extra person over when you were only supposed to have 10. And I'm bad because I decided to put my mask down at a hockey game when I couldn't talk to somebody. It's ridiculous. The whole thing's ridiculous. I am looking for change in Canada. I think the government right now needs to, like, I'm like I said, I really have to be careful with what I say, but I think the divide right now with our kids is because people are so afraid to do anything that we are told if we touch somebody or hug somebody, look at this, I can't hug you. No, no, don't hug, don't hug, don't hug. Oh my God. What do you mean I can't hug? I'm 3 years old. I want to hug. No, you can't. You're not allowed. You're not allowed. All of this stuff. That's why we don't have our kids. So the community needs to be rebuilt. And it's going to take people who aren't afraid, like myself at 41 years old, to stand up for my children so that my children can go to the neighbor and say, how are you? And not be afraid they're going to stab them or something. And it's all media. And I believe that we need to refocus the whole world without all of this crazy, like the media is just the biggest problem, and social media. Everything's perfect on social media. It's wonderful. I post all the time. My kid just won a Highland dance competition. Wow, look at me. I'm in Florida. I'm in Disneyland. Like, what about the time when you're on the floor bawling your eyes out because your friend treated you like crap? Or what about the time, you couldn't pay the bill, or the time you had to borrow money to pay your mortgage payment? Like, stuff like that does that go on social media? That's why we're creating the our kids aspect of the author you just said, Robert D. Putnam, because it's a very sad loss. And if we don't get back to our community, and I think this is a great way to go back to the music scene in the Celtic community in where I'm from, which is Nova Scotia. So yes, Cape Breton's doing it really well. And they have a lot of government support as well to really keep going with their tradition. But if we don't keep going with the tradition and we just say, whatever, or the Sir John A. Macdonald statue that's not going back up in Montreal, that was ripped down, which is, people are saying, well, good, we're going to put something there, but the Indigenous community has to have a say in that, because we shut that off years ago and we created a terrible history in what we did to those people, like what society at that time did to those people. So I think that if we don't start reconciling, which we are trying to do in Canada, but it's slow, we're never going to have our kids again, where we are, looking out for people. Remember all those stickers back when we were kids, neighborhood watch? Do you ever see those anywhere? Maybe you're not from Canada, but people will have those stickers in their window where they're saying, like, we're watching the neighborhood, we're looking out for your kids. Nobody has that anymore because we're all so consumed with ourselves, and we're consumed with what kind of clothing we're going to wear and what's the best new Nike sneakers we can buy for $300. Credit cards. We didn't have credit cards when we were kids. My parents never lived on credit. I'm sure yours didn't either back in the day. So I think we're doing a disservice. And as a parent, I'm going to start really changing the way I look at things with my own children and saying, it's okay to knock on the neighbor's door for a cup of sugar. It's okay. Go and introduce yourself. Halloween's a great time. I live over here, trick or treat, and I think, the concept of it could go back, but I actually do look out for the kids in my neighborhood and my friends' children. I do love and support them. And I work in the school board, and I work in the elementary school. So I love children. And I think if you go out of your way to say, hey, how you doing? And the kid doesn't look back at you and you go, hey, I said hi to you. Are you going to say hi back? Like, teaching children, it's okay to communicate with people. It's okay to say hi to somebody at the park. But again, you're going to need a lot of people to go that route, because a lot of people are going and they don't talk to me. Don't talk to me. You're not safe. You're not safe. I can only spend time with my family, and wearing a mask all the time. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I think that the coronavirus situation really did a massive disservice. I'm not talking about people getting sick. I'm not talking about death. Talking about all of the shutdowns and lockdowns. It
Mhm.
really, really changed the children. they've lost years of their education and they lost years of their social development because of it.
Mhm.
Not even being able to go to a park,
Mhm.
you know,
Yes.
it's ridiculous. So I think luckily for me, we didn't do that with our kids. We were still very active. We went outside all the time. We didn't instill fear in our children. And I'm very proud that I did that now that we're out of the other side of the pandemic.
Mhm. Um, I cover a lot of COVID in Canada during this podcast too. So your opinions are very much welcome. Um, in
Yeah, well,
fact,
you have to be very careful what you say in my as a musician,
mhm,
and other musicians that I know who feel the same way about me for many things are it's you're afraid to say it because there's so much media against saying anything bad about the pandemic. So you
mhm,
have to be really careful. But funnily enough, a lot of people feel the same way. That's the ironic part.
yeah, I understand, and certainly hope that I certainly hope that I don't have to edit out any of the things that you've just said thus far.
I don't think you should. No.
Okay, great. If you're fine with leaving it in, I'll leave it in.
Yeah, well, I never said anything particular. I just think that the pandemic has really, you know, it's done a disservice to the children, and it really has.
Which I agree wholeheartedly. And of course, since you live in Ottawa, you certainly have witnessed the flow of truck driver protesters into flowing into the capital.
Yeah.
I left Canada just 1 or 2 months before it happened. So I left on Christmas of
Yeah.
2021. So New Year of 2022,
Yeah.
the truckers came in, and I think they were expressing the same frustrations as you have, and also many more. And it is true that what the Canadian government has done, to prevent the pandemic from causing further harm, actually caused a good deal of harm.
Yeah. Yes, and I think that everybody tried to I don't believe anybody did anything on I mean, I honestly don't have a conspiracy theory against this. People did the best that they could. They tried to figure some stuff out. I do know some people that went to the trucker convoy that said it was the most peaceful and beautiful thing they've ever experienced, that the media turned it into an evil thing. Don't you think that there's going to be lots of crazy people, good and bad, that are going to join a big group and do something in front of a business or go take a pee in front of their door? Of course. There's tons of homeless people in Ottawa as well that are out doing things. You don't hear about that all the time. I'm just saying, or people who are addicted to drugs on the streets, which is also a big problem in Vancouver and other places. But the trucker convoy, I wasn't a part of it. I didn't go to it, but and I wasn't afraid of it. But I do know a person who went who said it was beautiful and it was very peaceful, and that the media didn't cover it like that. So what I would like as a person is just to see both sides, if possible, showing the good and the bad so that it's not just all bad. And I think that's where the problem lies. And people believe everything the media has to say. It's unbelievable. All you have to do is read five newspapers from left to right in terms of politics, and see the difference of opinion and educate yourself with differences of opinion. You don't have to believe it all. And you can believe it, but just educate yourself. Read. Don't just read one thing. It's ridiculous. It's like reading books. You just said you're an avid reader. You're gonna only read the things you want to believe, right? If you're gonna be, but if you are say, wait a second, no, that's not the equation. Try this math book. This will tell you what, that's interesting. People just don't, they just want to tunnel vision themselves. And that's where I find it really interesting, especially being in Canada right now, where it's a really tough place to be right now. Inflation is through the roof. People can barely pay their mortgages. Nobody can buy a house. I can barely pay for groceries. I have 4 children. Chicken breasts are $30 for 4 breasts. It's ridiculous. So something has to change, or people are going to start leaving the country. This used to be the land of the free, but it's not anymore. That's what I think.
Mhm. So, as someone who's drawn his experience from, well, living in Canada for a couple of years and also covered Canadian events, and also things relating to politics and philosophy, I find that in Canada in particular, in much of Western society as a whole, the balance between state and society has been tilted in favor of the state, as in the state has too much control and influence over our lives. So, um, So politics has been kind of like whether you are pro the current
Yeah.
government or you're anti the current government, but the binary I think misses way too many uh, aspects of people's lives that have nothing to do with what the government is up to at this point in time. So with the hyper attention to what is going on in Parliament Hill or what Prime Minister Trudeau says or did or does, we are neglecting the fostering of civil society, and I think that is a problem that I think transcends whatever partisan divide that Canada or the U.S. may be having right now.
Yeah, and I think again, Trudeau, I mean, I'm not going to talk about him. I don't even know him, never met him. He's
Mhm.
a human being. He's wonderful. I'm sure he has lovely qualities. It doesn't matter. People have to separate themselves from the humans that are running the party. The parties are the parties. But I think if you educate yourself and you look into the policies, and if you are that naive that you think when you go put $30 of gas in your car and you only get a little thing, if you don't start to think, I wonder why the gas prices are so high. Why are the mortgage rates so high? Why is Bank of Canada doing this? How come this inflation? And why is the oh well? If you start to look at all the reasons, you're gonna if you research it, but it's a lot of people just accept it and they just live their life. They have no idea that the government has anything to do with their life when really the government does, big time. So just look at the taxes that we're all paying here in Canada. So I just think we have to be really careful, but we have to do our research. We have to read and educate ourselves.
Mhm. Okay, so uh, driving away from the topics that may get both of us canceled. So tell me about
And you're welcome to take it all out if you want.
oh, it's fine. I'll leave it all in. I've I like discussing these issues with people, experts and normal people alike. So it's I appreciate the opportunity.
Right.
Okay, so tell me about some of your upcoming shows.
Oh my God. So we go from religion, politics, music shows. And now nobody's going to come to my shows. No, I'm just kidding. Upcoming shows. I have some private stuff happening where I'm doing like a lot of like corporate events. So I'm putting on what's called like a Nova Scotia kitchen party. I love doing that for corporate events where I get hired to perform with my band and with dancing and show like clients and corporate people. But the East Coast vibe is all about. I have a show on the 27th of September at the Rare Bird Live in Ottawa, where it's an intimate ticketed event where I'm featured. I'll be having piano with me and a special drummer named Debbie Watson. She's a good friend, but she's playing traditional Scottish Cape Breton style bodhrán drumming, and it's really awesome. She's very good. And then I am doing a Christmas show in Perth, Ontario on the 15th of December, one in Ottawa on December 9th. I'll be playing with the Ennis Sisters for a few shows in December as well. So they're coming from Newfoundland. And then I'm currently working on, if I can get it all together, a new single a tune that I wrote. We're doing a video. Hopefully in the next couple months that will be done. And then another song. Then I'm going to be releasing a bunch of singles in 2024 to then put out a new full length album. But it just takes time. And I do have 4 kids and it's been a couple busy years. So I'm hoping to get some new music out like ASAP. Um, so I can just keep on going. But I think right now, currently, I'm just enjoying performing and having a lot of fun doing that. And hopefully some new stuff will come out down the line. And it just takes time to be musically, pushing yourself for that. And I find the winter a bit slower because I have kids. I'm not touring a lot. A lot of people take off to Australia or Europe and stuff, but with the kids, it's been tough for me. I do a lot more Canadian stuff. Um, but that might change as the years go on and I have to put some new music out. It's really important to keep creating as a musician, and then you can get a lot more opportunity if you keep putting out new music, but you have to have the time to do it. So that's what I'm working on for the next couple months.
Yeah, I look forward to checking out your new music, and
Yeah, hopefully soon.
I look forward to having you on the show again when you have new music coming out.
Yeah.
All right. So
I'll
thank you. And of course, if you happen to be in this part of Europe, let me know.
100%. I'll come right over. We'll do a live podcast.
Of course, that would be greatest thing in the world. So a couple
Yeah.
of concluding questions. Earlier you alluded to certain traditions that, for example, including the Gaelic language, which right now it's an endangered language. And I think it was President Ronald Reagan of the US who says that liberty is only a generation away from extinction. And I would assume that tradition is that too. So how do you, in your efforts, keep the tradition that you've embraced alive?
Well, I in particular play a lot. I'm gigging all the time. And when I talk to my audience, I always promote the children aspect that I talked to you about earlier, like bringing your kids out to more shows, getting instruments in your house, stuff like that, in terms of being in a Celtic tradition, like fiddle lessons and piano lessons and all of that stuff. I think there's a lot of pockets of Canada that are doing a lot of work. I would say Cape Breton is probably in the forefront of really doing the Gaelic. The Gaelic words are on all the signs on the highway, the English, and then they have the Gaelic. So that's a really interesting way to do it as well. That makes somebody think, well, what is that word? Where does that word originate from? A lot of people are changing their last names back to Gaelic in Cape Breton. So they're pronouncing it the Gaelic pronunciation. It's a hard thing because Canada is very French and English is like the two languages that are really, uh, at the forefront of the education system. But really, there's a lot of cultures in Canada now. And I think they need to rethink what languages they're teaching. And I think there's a lot of Arabic, there's a lot of Cantonese, there's a lot of Filipino people that live here. There's a lot of, I would think that we need to focus on a lot of different languages. Gaelic is a tough one because it's not a mainstream language, but you can still preserve it. But that just comes with teaching children so they can teach their children. Do I think it's going to become like a second language? Absolutely not. I mean, I think it would be very tough to do that. But there's nothing wrong with preserving the language, and it should be considered kind of like, and I think it is like a fiddle tune where you pass it on, you pass it on, you pass it on, and then it won't become extinct. But it comes down to the children, and it comes down to the adults who want to take the time to, teach the kids preserving the music.
Mm-hmm. So, final question: what does music mean to you?
Music is a form of my body. It's an expression of life. It is a calm, anti-anxiety, full of love and life and laughter, and a feeling of hope. That's what it means to me. There's no despair in it. You put on something on your, on your iPad or on your Google, Alexa thing, and you're like, play whatever you're playing. When you're in a bad mood, sometimes music can spin you out of it within 30 seconds, within 20 seconds. And when you're lucky enough to play an instrument at a profession, like as a professional, like I am, you get to play for people who may be struggling, who may be feeling unloved, who may be feeling awful. And I find as a professional, my favorite thing is playing for people who really need it. I often play for elderly people. I often play for concerts with people who are shut-ins. I do a lot of, in the past especially, did a lot of old age homes where I would go in for free and just play for an hour. And people who cannot talk, who are in wheelchairs, you can see the glitter in their eye from the music. Music is actually the most therapeutic thing I think that the world can offer. So what it means to me is I'm so incredibly blessed, and I feel so lucky that my path took me to the music path. It's introduced me to so many people, so many walks of life, so many countries. I played for the Queen of England twice, who had passed away, our late Queen. I've played for prime ministers. I played for Barack Obama. I opened for the Beach Boys. I've done Dollywood. I've done so many cool things that if you don't do what I did as a child, you're not going to be able to do it as an adult. So you have to start from the beginning. So I guess it's a very long answer to say that music is my world.
Well, I cannot claim to have the same celebrity clout as the Queen of England or President Obama, but I can certainly attest to deriving a lot of meaning from your music.
Yeah, it is amazing. It is amazing. But anytime you want me to come back and talk about anything, I'm very open to many discussions. But at the end of the day, I really appreciate you having me.
Thank you. And of course, until next time.
Yeah, I'd love to chat with you more and more, and we'll keep in touch.